And welcome once again to Living in the 21st Century. Joining me today is Maksym Yali. He is from the Department of National Aviation University, Professor of International Relations of Ukraine. Professor, these are some very turbulent times that we are faced with. And Russia is on the threshold of invading your country. Do you have any reasons why Russia wants to invade the Ukraine?
Well, the reason is obvious, of course, we know. But first of all, I would like to mention that invasion of Russian troops started 8 years ago. In February 2014, they invaded firstly Crimea, then they annexed it illegally, and then started war in Donbass. It's a region of Ukraine, in the east of Ukraine. And since then, we have this war every day. Of course, for the first year, the actions, I would say, were pretty serious, and every day 15,000 people were killed for 8 years, and most of them were killed during first 2 years. And now again, there is a possibility of full-fledged invasion, I would say, because before that it was called hybrid war, because Russians do not admit that they invaded Ukraine, though they were prisoners, Russian soldiers in 2014, paratroopers, etc., etc. Nevertheless, of course, now, as you know, American newspapers, magazines, and European write every day that they're going to be full-fledged invasion. And the previous invasion to our borders, as you asked, was last year ago. Last year in spring. Again, there were more than 100,000 of Russian troops on our borders. Again, there were a risk for full-fledged invasion. But after President of the US, Biden, talked and met with President of Russia, Putin, in Geneva in the summer 2021, this threat disappeared for some time. Now again. And the reason, of course, it's obvious for Ukraine at least.
Yes.
Kremlin wants us to implement so-called Minsk agreements, which were signed in February of 2015, after there were serious fights in Debaltseve, and Russian militaries took part in it. There are plenty of proofs.
Yeah.
For example, President of France that time, Mr. Hollande, who participated in that negotiations during when they negotiating to settle the problem, wrote that Putin threatened that time President of Ukraine, Poroshenko, to beat all the Ukrainian army to come to Kiev, to the capital, to capture all of Ukraine.
Okay.
So it was a proof that they were present there. And now they want to finish to make us implement these agreements, to change our constitution, to give a special status of that occupied territories, which lead to very serious challenges to our sovereignty and territorial integrity. That's,
of course,
in few words.
Of course. At this time, how is the Ukrainians preparing themselves in the event of an invasion?
Well, the most important that now we are ready psychologically, unlike 2014, because I understand that in the US, citizens, people of US do not know pretty well the history of Russia, of Ukraine. We are modern state, only 30 years since we gained our independence after the collapse of the USSR. But We considered Russians as our brothers, neighbors, because a lot of families have relatives, very close ties. For example, I come from that region where the war is taking place, and just my mother city, Mariupol, is just 100 miles away from the Donetsk. It's the main city, the so-called capital of the Donetsk People Republic, so-called, because nobody admits it. Yes, and nobody could believe that Russian could invade, could annex our territory. We consider them as friends. For these 8 years since then, we already got used, and we realized that at least now Russia is an enemy for us. At least not the people of Russia, but Mr. Putin, Putin's regime, and they want to destroy our country. And we are preparing. Our army is much stronger now than 8 years ago, and people of Ukraine realize the threats of this invasion, and we are preparing. We got used to such a thought for these 8 years.
What do you think China's Prime Minister Xi Jinping endorsement means to Putin? Do you believe that this is the go-ahead to do what you are doing? You have our support?
No, actually, I would say it's a signal. It's not an endorsement to war. It's a signal, first of all, to the President of the United States, Mr. Biden, that he tries to make to restore relations, to better relations with between United States and Russia will lead to nothing. I mean, you know, the main goal of Mr. Biden to settle the relationships with Putin is not to allow Russia to become a main military ally of China, because everybody understands that without resources, natural resources, military resources of Russia, China has no chances to gain the global leadership, to conquer US, to become #1 superpower. And of course, China now is watching the situation, how US and its allies will react on Russia, because you see, Mr. Xi Jinping this year, 2022, I'm sure will run for the 3rd term. He wants to become a leader for the first time of China, to keep leading. And they have their own so-called Crimea, Taiwan problem, you know. And for the last half of the year, the military exercises nearby Taiwan increased greatly. And if to consider this experience in 2014, when Putin illegally annexed Crimea, it let him legitimize himself, because his support in Russia was very low after 2012. They were also just Bolotnaya, so-called square. We had Maidan and they had Bolotnaya. And it allowed him to increase the level of his support. And if now West let Russia invade Ukraine, not without sanctions, if there will be a war, of course, for Mr. Xi Jinping, it will be a good chance to repeat this trick with Taiwan, to occupy it, and to get better chances and support among Chinese people. That's I mean, the main signal of this endorsement, I would say.
Okay. Do you believe by chance that our former President Donald Trump, so close to Putin in the past couple of years, give Putin the sense that America is weak, considering the insurrection we had on January 6th, that our democracy is weak and we are falling apart, and the world no longer look at us out of the same eyes they look at us before. With that said, world leaders like Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin take this opportunity and moment to capitalize on what they want to do.
Well, of course, I participated myself for a few years in talk shows in Russia, propaganda talk show, I would say, where we discussed the topic of the Ukrainian-Russian war. And of course, also I participated in some programs concerning US and Russia relationships, because my PhD is about US. I study US foreign policy, etc. And here in Ukraine.
Right.
So, of course, they consider that for the last 4 years of the presidency of Mr. Trump, the US became weaker, that the society was fragmented. And of course, just these actions which took place in January the 6th weakened the US very much. And of course, he wants to use this chance to get Ukraine and other countries into its sphere of influence, because he considers that Ukraine is not a state, that it was a mistake. As he says, the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century was the decline, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and he wants to restore it. And without Ukraine, Russia has no chances to gain the status of empire, to be as strong as it used to be. And that's why he is watching and he is checking US and its allies in NATO, in Europe, how it reacts. And of course, he wants not only to conquer Ukraine, but he wants to destroy European Union. And he does his best. And of course, during the presidency of Mr. Trump, who quarreled with its allies, with Germany, with France, he put sanctions. He said that he will not give money to NATO. Of course, the relationships between US and its European allies worsened. They got much worse. And of course, Putin used it, this chance, and thinks that United States became much weaker. And now he wants to use these chances that Mr. Biden is only running for the first year, and that there is pandemic crisis, and to use it, believing that the attention of the US and other countries nowadays is just not to Ukraine,
right.
And everybody cares about his national interests. Yes, and of course he's trying to use this situation.
Well, Professor, I'm going to reach out to you again that we can follow up on this interview. This time, we'll do a half-hour interview opposed to 15 minutes. There's a lot that we have to discuss, and this is just the surface of it. So I want to say thank you. I will be looking forward to be speaking with you pretty soon. And until then, take good care, and all the best that there will be some resolution to this matter, and that we will have to go to war.
Okay, now you're welcome.
Okay, Professor, thank you so much. So at this time, we are bringing in Vasyl Shevchenko. He is the former Vice Minister of Transportation, Ukraine. Mr. Shevchenko, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Nice day. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So I want to refer to a statement that the French President Emmanuel Macron stated, that Putin's intention is not to go to war. Should this statement be ignored? Because Putin refuted that.
According to my opinion, that any attempt to stop him, it's a good idea. But I'm not sure that it will be able to stop him. It's just for negotiations. And we know that Russia Federation use against Ukraine a different type of pressure, so-called hybrid technology, and they try to use it against United States and Europe, and now Ukraine really wage war against Russia's occupation at the east part of Ukraine, and now Ukrainian peninsula, Crimea, is occupied by Russian troops, and they are satisfied that they managed to do it, and they will go further until all developed world will not stop him. Which way will it happen? Ukrainians are already fighting for our country, but it isn't enough to stop him. We will do our best to stop enemy and to stop invaders of our country. But Russia Federation has really powerful army, and we are not sure. We are not sure that they will use it against Ukraine. Because of threat of higher losses, and they will try to use technologies. They have checked it at the Crimea and at the east part of Ukraine, and they will involve in negotiations and will demand all they can. And now American president will have negotiations with Russia's president Putin, and we know that decision to storm Ukraine or not only in his head, and we know that United States support Ukraine, and I can say that biggest our friend and reliable our friend who help us in really difficult situation. Now Ukraine have received new technology, grenade RPG, which allow us to stop armed carriers and Russia's tanks, and we received consultation and technology support in every sphere of military, and because of it, I'm here, and I wanted to thank you, every Americans and government, United States and United States President for support, and want to tell that we are a good ally, and we will do our best to defend our interests, the democracy interests, and to defend Europe in our part. And first of all, I'd say that this technology from Russia Federation can be used against democracy and all European Union countries and countries who has any relations with the Russia Federation.
Okay. I want to ask you this question. In the event that this war unfolds, how strong is the Ukrainian army and its allied forces to stand up to Putin? One. And secondly, do you see this can go into a World War III if it comes to that?
I can say that we have a different example. I'd wanted to remind that Ukraine faced with the Russia Federation troops in 2014, and it wasn't troops. It was weakened place of Ukraine when from Ukraine run away pro-Russian president, and parliament haven't done decision about appointing acting president, and they use the situation and sent to Ukraine their battalions. And in those time, volunteers battalions stopped their military machine and stopped their tanks, and they managed to occupy only tiny type of regions, and they create the so-called republics. And they are holding it for implementing them back to Ukraine to have influence for Ukrainians' future. And I don't know that if they decide to do it, because we haven't had a really bloody war since Second World War, and now all expectation about really bloody war looks like evil in the world. And
Yes.
now I can say that Ukrainian troops will do their ordinary jobs. Right. And Ukrainians will do our best to defend our countries. To be honest, I tell you that we are living in this type of conditions every day. We heard that Ukrainian soldiers are wounded or killed. And every day we have our friends who are sharing pictures in the social media or telling story about familiar people who was suffered from the Russia's Federation invasion to this part of Ukraine. And because of it, I'd say that we don't worry if situation will go further, and right. We are ready to do our best to defend our country.
I recognize that the President of the United States, Joe Biden, had issued a warning to all Americans living in Ukraine to get out immediately. This seems to me that there will be a war. And my question is, do you think for one second that President Vladimir Putin is trying to restore the USSR and Ukraine becomes its prime target at this juncture simply because they figure that the United States is weak?
I cannot say exactly how this situation will develop, because it's foreign policy, and
right.
This type of policy, it's if you ask me how I can describe it, I tell that it's fighting between democracy and autocracy. Who is stronger, who is weaker. Democracy has advantages in development and relation in society, but at the same time, autocracy can use countries' resources just for a war, for increase influence, their influence in any regions, because it's a different type of behavior. And now we see it. And if it's difficult, yes, it's difficult to defend democracy standards. And now American President Joseph Biden does it. And he have had a few negotiations. He have tried to persuade his counterpart to stop amassing troops at the Ukrainian border. We are really thankful for him for it, and we are thankful for every Americans who know and who support us. And how it will develop further, I cannot say exactly.
Right.
But no one and no country had this type of experience. And I can say that it's good that Ukraine and Ukrainians defend democracy at the battle line, and it's good that now we confirming every day that democracy values for Ukrainians and for society is main priority, and we are fighting for it now.
Okay. Do you think it's simply an exercise that Russia is undergoing, or is it a test to prove America's loyalty in standing by Ukraine and its allied forces, or Putin really means business?
I'd say
we will have a minute to answer that question. I'm sorry.
Yes, but I don't know exactly what will be next, because they are so-called drilling troops or exercise troops between Russia and Belarus. And to answer, Ukraine has military troops at Ukrainian side, and now I'd say that Ukrainian troops are really seriously trained by instructors from different countries, including United States and Great Britain. And we have serious equipment, and we have anti-tank and anti-carriers system. But our weak point is that we don't have enough military planes, because it's really expensive, and Ukraine haven't managed to receive it. And it's only weak, and Ukraine doesn't have system which allow us to defend our cities from the heat of missiles, but we have enough to do it. And I'd say that only a real battle will show how it will grow, and first battles will show how situation will grow up.
Yes, well, Mr. Vasyl Shevchenko, it's a pleasure speaking with you, and I would love to follow up with a future interview based on how things are going there, and I would reach out to you pretty soon. And for all those who have been tuning in, I want to say thank you for joining me on Living in the 21st Century.